Hey guys, welcome back to the 516RC YouTube channel, and today we're going to be replacing the stock motor and speed control in my ECX Torment 2WD Brush Edition with some new electronics. We're going to replace the motor with a Titan 12-turn 550 size brush motor from Traxxas, as well as the XL5 speed control. Now, the motor and speed control in this truck are pretty good from the factory. The truck's plenty fast, but it uses a Dynamite 15-turn unit and a brushed ESC as well. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to not only replace the motor on your truck, but make sure that it's running properly with setting up gear mesh and other little tips and tricks. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do before replacing your motor is to take both rear tires off. Now this is going to help with creating a little more space for you to work, not only on your workbench but also with the vehicle to make it easier to access these little tiny transmission screws to get the case off. Alright, so just a little quick thing. If you're working on specifically an ECX Torment, the wheels have these little spacers on them, so you might keep track of these because they help with the offset of the wheels and help the fitment in the fenders. Alright, now that you've gotten to the transmission itself, the first thing you're going to want to do is use your hex wrench to take off these screws that hold on the gear case. Now, the Torment actually has an adjustable slipper clutch, which is right there, but it also has plastic gears inside the transmission, so if you want to actually go to possibly a brushless setup, you're going to need to upgrade to metal gears in the transmission. Just a helpful hint. Alright, so to get the transmission case off, you're going to need a 1mm hex driver, and you're going to take off the 3 screws that hold the transmission case on. Alright, so in pretty much every RC vehicle, your motor is held onto the motor plate by these 2 screws. And in front of the 2 screws, you have the pinion gear, which you're going to most likely need to take off before replacing the motor. So in order to detach the motor from the motor plate, just use a Phillips head screwdriver to get these 2 screws out, and maybe even pull the pinion gear off, depending on how large the opening in the motor plate is, and your motor will just slide right out backwards. Alright, so I moved the truck over to the side here. I'm going to show you the motor that was in the Torment over there. So this is a sealed can non-rebuildable brush motor, 15-turn by Dynamite. This is your pretty standard fare for an RTR motor. You've got a pinion gear included, all metal. Now, the difference between a brush motor and a brushless motor is that the brush motor actually uses brushes inside to make contact with the actual rotational assembly inside the motor to generate power. Now the brushless motor, like this, does not have any such contact, and it thus is much more efficient, but you don't get the low speed control that a brush motor would provide. Now this motor is a 540 size can motor, and when compared to the Traxxas 12-turn we're going to be putting in there, as you can see, it's going to be just a tad shorter. Now these things are actually magnetic, so that's another good point. Don't put anything on top of your brush motor that's magnetic because it'll eventually wear it out. But as you can see, the 540 size is a little bit shorter than the 550 size, even though they're both around the same width. As you can see, move my hand out of the way. They're both the same width, but the 550 can is just a little longer. So we're going to be putting this in here, and we're going to be putting the XL5 speed control as well. And this should not only improve the low-end torque of the truck, which is what this motor lacks most of. It's pretty good on the top end, but on the low end it doesn't really have as much torque as a 550 size can motor would, because this longer can allows for a larger rotational assembly inside, giving more torque and more power. Alright, I've just moved the ESC wires out of the way because we're going to focus on the motor now. Now, the ECX Torment uses 48 pitch gearing, which is the same as our little 12-turn over here. So what you want to do is line up the motor bolts with the 2 pre-cut holes in the actual can, and then slide it in. And then once you have it lined up, just kind of screw it in so that it links up. You might need to move it around just inside to find the point where it screws in. It's always pretty common. But as you can see, the motor is now in the truck. Now, what you're going to want to do is set up the gear mesh properly, because if you do not set up the gear mesh properly, you're going to have problems when you're running the car. The car will eventually grind down the spur or the pinion gear, and also possibly cause transmission damage. So what you're going to want to do is, for a beginner, you can put a piece of paper inside and then just slam the gears together. That's what I've always learned. Even though the gears are being like slammed together, the piece of paper inside is the right amount of clearance that you're going to want. But that was for track racing. So what you're going to want to do is slide the motor up so that the pinion and spur are obviously just touching, but the fact that you can, this is not locked right now, but you should have the spur just a little bit of play. As you can see, this just moves just a tad. This is going to help with cushioning large blows and split-second accelerations. So I'm going to tighten the motor down and set the gear mesh, and then we're going to go back to putting the transmission case on and then move on to the ESC. So I actually just went around and changed the pinion up a few teeth from the stock Traxxas 16 turn. Put in a TLR 20 turn that I have lying around, just because I know this truck is, that motor was from a Stampede, so it's going to be really undergeared for this type of application. Now I have a battery plugged in, just testing the stock ESC. I'm just going to make sure that the gear mesh is right, and you don't want to hear any screeching, you want to just hear a smooth sound. So I'm going to test it out. I'm going to give it a little bit of throttle. Alright, so as you heard, that's just pretty smooth sounding. Might need a little bit of fine tuning, but you can't really tell just for sure, but that sounds pretty spot on for right now. So, alright, once that's done, I'm going to just assemble the gear case back together, and then we'll move on to the speed control. Before I put this on, I just cut a small hole in the transmission cover just to allow the motor shaft to pass through, because I didn't want to cut the motor shaft, because the Titan 550 shafts are a little long, so yeah, this is just going to allow the motor shaft to pass through without any performance detriments. I'm going to just tighten it up now. Alright, now that we got the drivetrain finished up, we're going to move on to the speed control. Now, the Dynamite speed control in this car is held on with two little screws on this plate here. So, firstly, to get it off, you're just going to need to remove the two screws on the side with a Phillips head screwdriver. And then you can get to work mounting the XL5 speed control. Alright, so eventually we're going to have to unwire the Dynamite speed control from the receiver, which is up in the front there, but now it's time to mount the XL5. So I just use double-sided tape. This is just U-glue. It's stuff you can find at CVS for a few bucks. You get a bunch of sheets, really strong, relatively waterproof double-sided tape, and you can just kind of cut it to the size you need. Pull the backing off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and mount this behind the mounting place, just so it has something to brace against in the event of impact. Just kind of press it down. Looks pretty straight. That looks pretty good. So just going to let that sit for 2 minutes. Then now we're going to also have to figure out how to wire the speed control wire underneath the battery posts and into the receiver. So yeah, let's get up to the receiver and figure out what we need to do in there. Alright, the nice thing about these Spectrum receivers is that they're already labeled about which port controls which. So this one you're just going to use the port that says throttle. Always make sure that the black wire of any electronic is facing the outside of the receiver. So you're just going to want to line it up like so. Plug it into the port that says throttle. Might take a little bit of wiggling just because of different plugs. And it should just sit right in here. Now you can reconnect the steering servo in a minute, but this is all bunched up. So right now we're just going to leave this off to the side. Now that everything's connected, we're going to have to unzip all of this stuff and figure out how to effectively wire the stuff in between the little gap on the side of the battery tray. Alright, so I just uncut the wiring and found that this wire is for the steering servo. Now I'm just going to plug it in like so. A little bit of a tight fit. But there you go, now everything's attached and ready to work. Now all we have to do is take out the old wiring from the old speed control, which is still attached at this point, and fit the new one in. Alright, now that we got the ESC sorted, the last thing we're going to have to do is to connect the ESC to the motor. Now, this is simply just done by wiring, or putting the wires underneath the shock tower, plugging in red to red, plugging in black to black. Now, if you plug them in backwards, you won't blow your motor. The motor will just spin backwards, but it's not good to have it spinning backwards. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to put the tires back on, show you guys what everything looks like when it's all complete, and I think that's going to be the end of this video, because our motor install and ESC install is pretty much complete on this ECX Torment. Well guys, that's it. We got the motor and speed control installed on this ECX Torment, and it is guaranteed to be faster than the stock setup and be a lot more fun to drive both off-road and on-road. We got the XL5 speed control sitting up high, while we've got the 12-turn 550 size brush motor sitting in the back, and we've learned also how to rewire everything in the receiver box to make everything work right. So that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, please give it a thumbs up, and if it was informative to you, also give it a thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't already for more future content with this truck. If you have any questions for me about the install or about the video, leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.